Okay, let's dive into this because today we are unpacking one of the absolutely most incredible, frankly, paradoxical stories in all of human history. We're looking at the life, the tragic death, and the massive, enduring legacy of Joan of Arc. But listen, we aren't just going to sit here and recite dry dates and dusty facts, right? Instead, we're going to look at her incredible story through the lens of leadership, of pure strategy, and what actually happens when an unstoppable force of conviction crashes head-on into an immovable, entrenched establishment. 19. I really want you to just sit with that number for a second. It is almost impossible to comprehend, but 19 is the exact age Joan of Arc was when she died. 19 years old when she was burned at the stake. I mean, think about what she managed to accomplish before even hitting her 20th birthday. When you contrast that sheer youth with the colossal, enduring legacy she left behind, it's just absolutely staggering. So, the core question we really need to figure out today is this. How exactly did a 19-year-old, illiterate peasant girl completely change the fate of an entire nation? Seriously, how does that happen? I want you to think of this whole analysis less as a standard historical biography and way more as a disruptor's playbook. Because as you'll see, her absolute unbreakable convictions single-handedly shifted the entire balance of power in Europe. Section 1. A nation in despair. The impossible status quo. To really grasp what happened, you have to understand the utter nightmare she walked into. France was losing the 100 Years' War against England, and I mean losing badly. More than half the country was occupied by the English and their Burgundian allies. The general mood? Deep, deep despondency and total resignation. So she's born around 1412 into this broken, occupied nation. Then, boom, she steps onto the stage and pulls off a miraculous victory at Orléans in 1429. Just 2 short years later, in 1431, she's executed, and then, centuries down the line, in 1920, she's canonized as a saint. It's this incredibly rapid, truly explosive sequence of events that permanently altered the course of history. Let's put this into perspective. For nearly a century, the French had the exact same commanders, the exact same army structure, fighting for the exact same weak crown prince, the Dauphin Charles, and they were getting absolutely zero results. Nothing. The situation was completely desperate. You had a military fighting cynically, mostly just for a paycheck, and a leadership that had completely run out of ideas. The established commanders were just deeply, hopelessly entrenched in their own failures. Section 2. The strategy of conviction. Entering the fray. Right into the middle of this dismal, failing scene, a 16-year-old girl bursts in. She crops her hair, puts on men's clothes, and travels straight across enemy territory to the crown prince's palace. Why? Because she was completely convinced by heavenly voices that she had a divine mandate from God to liberate France, and as brilliantly illustrates the ultimate clash of paradigms. On one side, you have the old guard, cynical, pessimistic, fiercely loyal only to local nobles and their own wallets. On the other side, you have Joan's strategy. As the playwright George Bernard Shaw pointed out, she was arguably one of the very first true nationalists. She brought an entirely new playbook to the battlefield. She taught them how to fight for a united national cause, fiercely loyal to her country and religion, fueled completely by absolute conviction rather than just mercenary gain. Shaw famously called her a born boss, and honestly, he hit the nail on the head. She had these exceptional leadership qualities and could literally browbeat anyone who dared to stand in her way. She actually secured an army from Charles, suited up in white armor, rode a white horse, and pulled off a stunning, miraculous victory by lifting the siege of Orléans. And she didn't stop there. Soon after, she escorted Charles right through enemy territory to Reims to finally have him crowned King of France. She built all of that unbelievable momentum in just a few short years. Section 3. Destabilizing the status quo. The threat of true leadership. Now, here is the harsh truth about change management. True leaders essentially destabilize the established order. When you introduce profound, radical change to an impossible status quo, you're going to create winners and you're going to create losers. And the losers, they will always resist. Just look at the powerful vested interests and the actual traitors that aligned against her. The nobles resented her vision of a powerful central king wielding absolute power over them. The church, well, they felt completely threatened by her direct, unmediated communication with God. It completely bypassed their authority. Her own army commanders absolutely hated being made to look like fools by a teenager. And get this, even King Charles VII, the guy who literally owed his crown to her, started feeling like she was getting way too powerful. The establishment simply could not handle the math. They literally couldn't stomach the fact that a teenage peasant accomplished more in 4 years than they had in an entire century of utter failure. By essentially exposing them as the fools they were, she painted a massive, glowing target right on her own back. So when things eventually took a bad turn, she found herself with absolutely zero support from the very people she had just elevated to power. Section 4. Betrayal in the Trial, the Ultimate Sacrifice. Which brings us to the ultimate betrayal. In 1430, while defending a town against a Burgundian assault, she was thrown from her horse, locked out of the city gates, and captured. She was literally sold to the English. And King Charles? He made absolutely no attempt to negotiate her release. He completely abandoned her just to distance himself from a controversial figure. Instead, she gets handed over to a church court in Rouen, staring down 70 charges, including heresy, witchcraft, and cross-dressing. Why those specific charges? Because the English desperately needed a political excuse to explain away their own humiliating military defeats. The only way they could possibly justify getting beaten by a teenage girl was to formally brand her a witch and a heretic. Those final days of her trial are just agonizing to recount, but they completely showcase her truly enduring nature in the toughest of times. Under extreme, terrifying threat, she momentarily broke. She relented and signed a confession to save her life, agreeing to submit to the church. But when she realized that her so-called mercy meant living the rest of her days locked away in a lightless dungeon, her fierce loyalty to her cause came roaring back. She decided right then and there that a life like that just wasn't worth living. So she put her men's clothes back on, essentially tearing up her recantation, knowing exactly what that choice would mean. Section 5. A renewed fire. The Martyr's Legacy. On May 30th, 1431, she was taken to the old marketplace of Rouen and burned at the stake. The English, and all her enemies, thought the fire would simply erase her from history. But actually, burning her publicly was a massive historical miscalculation. All it did was elevate her into a true martyr. Think about what a martyr actually is. They're leaders who hold unshakable beliefs for a cause. They refuse to yield to threats. They deeply disrupt organizations, which naturally creates enemies. But because they choose suffering over compromising their vision, their ideas not only survive them, they gain exponential strength. In George Bernard Shaw's epilogue to his play about Joan, there's this profound line from a soldier that captures the whole thing perfectly. He says, "They could not burn her heart. You can destroy people, but not ideas." By choosing the stake over a dark dungeon, she transformed into this untouchable, international symbol of conviction and sacrifice. If she had just rotted away in a cell, she might have been totally forgotten, but her public martyrdom, that cemented her vision forever. So, what does this all mean for us? What's the real takeaway here? It's that leadership is fundamentally a risky business. Whether you're leading a medieval army into battle or you're just pushing for change in a modern corporate office, true leadership essentially destabilizes the established order. Standing up for a cause, driving real change, exposing the inefficiencies of the old guard, it is always going to invite immense resistance. And sometimes, standing firm carries a really heavy cost. Joan of Arc's burning at the stake literally changed the world. She completely single-handedly exposed the stagnation of her era, she modeled absolute courage, and she sacrificed herself so that her ideas could live on. So, as you face resistance in your own life, in your own work, will you channel the fire of her sacrifice into your own leadership journey today? We really hope you leave here feeling a renewed fire inside you to be a bolder, better leader. Thank you so much for joining me today. Keep leading and keep that fire burning.